Good evening. Welcome to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone Radio Show. My name is Leon Jones. Tonight's topic, emotions cloud critical thinking. Emotions cloud critical thinking. Now, why do I say that? It's very simple. When one has a conversation and the dialogue isn't going the way the other person wants to receive it, they have an emotional reaction. Now, some of the emotional reactions include interrupting because they don't want the other person to finish their point. And if there is something to be made as far as criticism is concerned, there's going to be a lot of denial in place, which that's another form of a emotional disorder. Then the name calling, then the conflict, the argumentation. All of these are bases of emotional disorders. Now, why does this happen? Basically, a number of us, and I don't care if you're black, white, Latino, but a number of us, number one, we really don't know how to handle real truth. In fact, if you look at this country that we live in, a lot of what you see is by design or deception. This country gives us an idea that we're equal under the Constitution, but we're not equal under the Constitution. That being said, there are some of us who have actually benefited off of their own policies, and there's some of us who haven't. Now, the United States is made up of different communities. Some communities have made it, and some communities are at the bottom of the barrel. Now, for the communities that are at the bottom of the barrel, why do they continue to be at the bottom of the barrel? The reason why is, number one, there's poverty, lack of education, poor decision making. Of course, you can put in there unequal justice. That being said, the communities at the bottom react very emotionally. The problem with reacting in an emotional tone, it doesn't solve the problem. In fact, the real problem is the mental and psychological issues. And see, I'm one of the only brothers who's talking about these types of issues on YouTube where, let's go to the black sector, a number of the YouTubers are talking about gossip. I don't talk about gossip because these mental and psychological issues are very important because I have to socialize with individuals who have a lot of emotion but irrational thinking. This is why the emotional disorders exist. Now, I did a video last night and I talked about delusion and paranoia. Well, if you look at those two disorders, particularly in the African American community, those are two big issues of why black men and black women cannot get along. Those two issues alone equal a heavy dose of emotional disorders. And let me give them to you. The argumentation, the denial, the anger, the mistrust, and the list goes on. Now, if you go in every other community, it's the same way. Now, again, living in the United States of America, it's the best country to live in as far as our so-called freedoms. We're not completely free because this country is a democratic republic. However, we're not communist like Russia or China. So we do have a representative government. Now, some people might ask, what does that have to do with emotional disorders? It has a lot to do with emotional disorders because a number of us, when we go to the polls to vote, we are voting on what we think we want, but basically a number of us don't know what we want because we are too emotional. We don't sit down and actually think. We react emotionally, particularly when it comes to debates or conversation. And why does this happen? Because it's how the person receiving the information is taking the information in. People who react very emotionally become defensive. Again, they have a mind of conflict, mistrust, they're in denial, they're very narcissistic. In fact, when you have a conversation with a person who is on an emotional rant, you can't talk to them. Why? Because they have a delusion that everything they believe is right, even if you set the facts in front of them. They don't want to be criticized. Well, nobody wants to be criticized. And in this country, a lot of that behavior is taking place. In fact, when I say a number of us are living lies, it is true because the truth doesn't stand for anything here in the United States. It's whatever feels good at the moment, just to make a person feel good. And this is where you get all of the deception and the delusional power. See, if you look at the United States of America, many of us walk around full of emotion. And that being said, when you don't sit down and think through issues rationally, you're going to react emotionally. This is why emotions cloud critical thinking. See, one who thinks critically has a plan and a backup plan, and they execute it. Individuals who react emotionally don't have a plan at all. In fact, they use their defensive tactics, and I'm not saying shaming tactics, I'm saying defensive tactics, irrational thinking, narcissism, delusion, anger, violence. Those are all emotion. And when a person reacts with emotion, there's no way that you can talk to them at all. Now, does that mean we discard that person? No. We have to help people with mental disorders. And what I do in these videos, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I'm a civil engineer. What I'm doing is giving you some management skills on how to manage your disorder. The biggest obstacle that some of us have is admitting that we have an emotional disorder. And when you look at people with emotional disorders, if I took a picture of everyone who has a emotional reaction and it leads to anger, violence, where individuals are getting harmed, and then I show them the picture that I have taken in video form, maybe they'll get it. But that being said, we all have emotions. but it's how you channel your emotions. Now, of course, I've said in my past that I've had anger issues as well, but I was able to get help. And I tell my audience why I was angry. Of course, everybody's had bad things happen to them in the past. But one thing about the past, you have to learn from it and talk about what went on, especially when you're in a state of emotions. Because there's some things that are very difficult to really get over, and there are traumas involved, like a molestation and a rape. I've talked to a number of people myself, and I even learned from them. And let me tell you something, the only way a problem is going to be solved is if you admit you have a problem. And reacting emotionally just makes everything worse. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you feel yourself getting emotional over a topic or criticism, take a step back. And one thing I want to tell you all, if there's a disagreement between two people, the one who is defensive or the one who's doing the shaming, that person, the reason why they're being emotional, because they're the receiver of information that is true. And when truth comes out, people don't like the truth. And see, looking at what's been happening in the United States, a number of us are living a lie anyway. Because we think we have everything under control, and then the rug gets pulled out from under us through some policy that the government makes. See, if you don't have money in this country, you're going to be under the guise of the government. And let me tell you something. What government does is play to everyone's emotions. If you all are paying attention to any of the political debates, or even if you have a boss at work, the strategy is to always play with your feelings. Why? Because your feelings are the most vulnerable area. And when you hit somebody where it hurts, and that's the feelings, you cause people not to think irrationally, and what happens? There's where you get the conflict. So the way to avoid all of that is to learn to think critically. And when I mean thinking critically, have an exit strategy. If you feel you can't talk to a person because they're getting extremely emotional, take a step back, listen to what they have to say, and move on. Because the worst thing you could do as a presenter and as a receiver, when you get angry, a conflict occurs, nobody gets anything done, because what happens is individuals get off the subject matter and they start attacking each other with ad hominem attacks. That's another example of emotions clouding critical thinking. What we have to learn to do is accept that we all have emotions. Everybody has buttons that can be pushed. But the individuals who know how to channel their emotions are going to have an easier time getting through life. Let me give you another example. Let's talk about social media, particularly in the African American sector of YouTube. Many of us have to have a thick skin because individuals come on our channels. You have a number of faceless trolls who have nothing but an avatar. They use somebody else's name. When they write something, they act like they are trying to teach you something. I remember I did a video about CVS and Walgreens. Well, I didn't know who the person was, but they disguised themselves as Patricia Ann. And the person thought that my skin was going to be in an uproar because that troll said, let me help you with the subject matter. I didn't need his help. I knew exactly what I said about my video. That's why I don't mind individuals if they come to my channel. If you don't like my content, you can give me a thumbs down. It's not going to hurt me one bit because at the end of the day, I still get up and do more videos because my emotions aren't affected. Because if I get emotional and I say something out of turn, that means I've downgraded myself to your level. And I cannot be emotional because I need my critical thinking. Now, that being said, when it comes to emotions, don't get yourself in an uproar with an irrational person. Because if you do, you're going to end up the one who seems like they're crazy when you're not crazy. See, there are a number of issues that lead to emotions. Because one must ask people, why do you feel this way? And you should ask those questions when it comes to getting involved in a relationship. Because there are a number of individuals who can't have relationships because they had bad relationships in the past. And they are guarding their feelings like caulking a steel drum. They don't want the air to get in that steel drum. That's what I'm talking about. Because they don't want to get hurt. I don't blame them. This is why the trust level is low in some people, because of what happened in the past. However, if you don't let go of the past, you can't go on to the future. Therefore, you isolate yourself. This is why when I tell people about being argumentative, it doesn't solve anything. See, an argument and a debate are very different. See, when you debate, you both take a position. When you argue, you both take a position as well. But debating, you're taking a position based on logic. Arguments, you're basing your position off of feelings. And what happens? Again, when you invoke your feelings in anything you do, you become reckless, irrational. And you become very difficult to deal with in the real world because you lack social skills. None of us are perfect. But what I'm doing in this video is giving every individual some examples of how emotional disorders affect you as a person. Because in the real world, we don't live on an island. We must be able to associate ourselves with other people, even ones to whom we don't agree with. And let me tell you something. I can learn a lot from people to whom I don't agree with, because what I do, I learn to take that other person's position and I can deconstruct their argument point by point by point by point, but they can't deconstruct mine. Why? Because they're on the feelings while I'm on the logic trip. And see, what I want to do is learn from that other person. They might not want to learn from me, but it's crucial that we keep our emotions intact. Because if we do something without thinking, the consequences will come. And one thing that we must understand as individuals, don't live for the moment. Because that moment can go away in a fraction of a second. That being said, in summary, when it comes to emotions, learn how to channel your emotions so you will be a rational thinker. Because if you don't, emotions will cloud your judgment and critical thinking. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show for this evening, Wednesday, Hump Day, May 17th, 2017. You can tune in to the 411 Talk Zone radio show every Saturday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Blog Talk Radio. Guest call-in number is 215-383-5785. If you like my videos, please share and subscribe to the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube so I can continue to give you quality information for educational purposes from a professional and mature perspective. Now, on this channel, I don't debate, nor do I talk about emotional issues or issues that are, I call them social issues. But if I sound like I'm utilizing a social issue, what I'm doing is taking that issue and using it as an example so I can break it down into components so you will understand where I'm going with the conversation. Because that's how logical people think, not emotional people. Also, I do not participate in drama or unnecessary bickering because they're emotional. And why? Because they're counterproductive. On this channel, I'm here to give you information, education. This is why I named my channel the 411 Talk Zone radio show, because 411 means information. And all the information that I gather is researched by me, and I'll give you my personal experiences because I want to help people add some alternative planning in their lives so they can survive in the real world without doing much struggling. And it's always better to learn from somebody who has made mistakes so people like me can pass the information to you. And if you see it clearly without emotion, you will learn how not to make the same mistakes that I made. You're going to make mistakes, but you're going to tell your fellow men and women the same thing that I'm telling you because you want to pass that information down. And what I'm giving you is information that's real but positive, because knowledge is power. And if you have a topic, a business, or a new YouTube channel that you would like for me to discuss on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, please email me at lej6521@gmail.com. And if you have a comment, please leave your comment in the comment section under the video. But make sure that your comments are pithy, no bloviating, pettifogging, or filibustering if you wish to opine. Now that's it for this video. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. Remember, please be gentle and respectful to each other and have a wonderful and blessed evening. Good night.